This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 23. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network from idpguys.org. So, welcome back once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So today we're going to be continuing our fan base series, this time covering the Washington Commanders. Still getting used to saying that, but it is the Commanders. We are doing this and bringing in some of my favorite people from the fantasy football community to talk about their favorite teams, just to add a little bit more depth and a little bit more heart to the discussion, because I may not be as invested or as much in the know as my guests are. So I'm very happy to bring a very good and funny guest on to the show today. We have with us today Kieran from Fantasy Gazette. He's a content creator from the great Fantasy Gazette. How you doing? And how long have you been a Commanders fan?
I'm doing good. I'm doing so good. I have been a Redskin football team Commander fan since I was 8 years old, I think. I was trying to think about that today, and I think I would have been 8. Yeah, 2000, and I look older than I am. 2003. That would have been the Bucks versus the Raiders in the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah,
that was the first year that I ever watched any football. And I was obsessed with Warren Sapp after the following year. So I started watching football. And my uncle was a Washington fan, and of course, just like roped me in because he had no kids. So
there you go. Okay,
I became the little nephew that would watch with him. So
who was the quarterback of the team at that time?
Mark Brunell.
Mark Brunell. Okay. Yeah, I remember. I saw a Facebook memory of mine saying that Rex Grossman makes me laugh. I think it was like at this time, like 9 years ago, he had this prediction that the Skins at the time were going to win like the NFC East. I'm just like, this was like me at my peak, like scumbag fandom time. Like I've kind of put it down.
What's really sad is in my what is this now? Basically 20 years of fandom. I think Mark Brunell has been our most consistently good quarterback we've had.
Right. Yeah. As we'll get into in a little while, we will touch on that a little bit and leading up to like the new quarterback and everything else. But yeah, it has just been kind of an unfortunate, series of events there. With I'm just thinking of this now, like with RG3, and then
RG3
at least
was amazing for a year, man. It felt so.
Oh,
great.
It was literally electric. It was phenomenal. As an Eagles fan, I literally was not having a good time watching him just blow up, in the games and stuff. And then, unfortunately, with the injuries and stuff, couldn't quite stay on the field.
Yeah.
And then Cousins comes in, he's pretty solid. And then after Cousins has left, it's just been kind of a mess at the position, which we will get to. But yeah, very excited to have you on. You are the second repeat guest, so it's a very special honor at this point. Obviously, I had you and Josiah on just by yourselves. I had Josiah on a little while ago, and now you are the official second.
We both have really sad teams, so
That's right, but you guys made it a fun discussion either way. And speaking of which, just wanted to give a couple shout outs here to Fantasy Gazette. Just really hilarious content. You guys have been on fire lately. The one that really sticks out to me is just kind of capitalizing on all that Zach Wilson stuff. Yeah. Just the way you're able to have a fake player quote in a relevant story, but also play into like some of the training camp news is just phenomenal to me.
I was gonna say my favorite thing. I think the quotes that we've done a couple times are probably my favorite format, simply because it's the one that gets people the most. Because our articles are sometimes outlandish. The memes are kind of ridiculous sometimes, but the quotes, people just automatically assume a quote is real. And one of my favorite things on there is someone will be like source, and we're like, us. Like, we're the
That's right.
source.
They're the number one trusted source for fantasy
Exactly.
football, So, but yeah, just kind of working on the Zach Wilson struggling in camp and Joe Flacco getting first team reps, and then the Zach Wilson extracurricular, stuff off the field, the rumors from like the ex-girlfriend and all this. It was just what was a perfectly written a fake player quote. It was Joe Flacco. He better watch his back because his wife is a crisp 37-year-old. Just amazing, just fantastic. I can't recommend people check out your stuff enough. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. So basically what we're going to go through in this show is summarize the 2021 season for the Commanders, work our way up through their offseason, touch on their free agency and NFL draft selections, then take a look ahead for the 2022 season, looking at their schedule, and then breaking down who we like or don't like on the Commanders from a fantasy perspective. So, for a summary from the Commanders, basically they finished with this was the football team. This was the football team in 2021. They finished with a 7-10 record. That was good enough for third in the NFC East. They did miss the playoffs only for the second straight year, but now they have a new starting quarterback and a new team name, as they are officially the Commanders. So, what is your level of anticipation like for this season?
I think this year, I think my anticipation is I'm really excited to see, first off, what and we'll talk about Wentz a little bit coming up, but what Wentz can do with the weapons we've given him now. I don't expect us to be a deep run playoff team. I mean, like, I'd be ecstatic to even slip on the wild card. But this year, I think we're given in a 2-year window to say, okay, we've got a lot of young guys right now. We've added, this year, we're going to talk about rookies too, but added quite a few guys in, like skill guys. So we're talking Dotson, Robinson thrown in there. We put, Mathis on the line. I think these guys, definitely can build up and grow. Our defense, we talked about early last year, was really ugly. It was a brand new unit, hadn't really played a lot together. First 6 games, I think we were ranked like 31st. And the last 6 games we came in like 4th. And they looked really, really good. They started playing together. Our problem was we were giving up so many turnovers on offense and stuff. And so our defense played 50 minutes of a freaking game. But they're starting to look good. So for this year, like I said, a wild card spot would be super exciting. Our division is always a mess as to who pulls in where. But I think for me, I'm like, all right, let's see what a veteran quarterback in Wentz can do with our weapons this year, and see what happens next year. Pull it all together.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing that always makes me nervous, just as an Eagles fan going up against Washington, is like that defensive line. It's
you mean
really
Alabama Crimson Tide.
That's right. Yeah. Plus Chase Young, and we do we wish him a speedy recovery. But so just being able to dominate at that point, attacking an offensive line and rushing the quarterback, that's just a great place to start. Now, obviously, like you said, you have a pretty solid a front seven.
Yeah.
And now a quarterback who, if can be improved, I think absolutely can put them in a position to win. And again, with the carousel that the NFC East is, it is a very interesting situation to watch. But I do think you probably are correct in having a more grounded expectation level of maybe a couple years down the line, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's very interesting. Now, this would be Ron Rivera's 3rd season with the team. Okay. After 2 straight seasons of exactly 7 wins, do you think it's a fair question to ask if Ron Rivera's on the hot seat, or do you think it's just in the best team's interest to keep him on because of other circumstances that have fallen on the team?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question to kind of think about what his future looks like there, but I still think he's our guy, and I don't hear any whispers of that not being the way it is now. I imagine 2 years, we throw another year and a half, 2 years down here and nothing changes, that's going to be a problem. but he kind of got thrown into that mess of picking up after RG3. You said we lost RG3, Cousins rolled for a minute, and then we've just had a mess of Alex Smith,
Heineke.
Heineke, which Heineke was exciting, but Heineke was never going to be the answer. Fitzpatrick, right. He's kind of had to just piece together things, and I think he's done really well with the things that he could piece together. So our quarterback situation's a mess, and it has been. But like you said, with the line, our front seven is wild. Like it's really fun to watch. And when those guys are clicking, and when our safeties are playing really well, that just leaves them up to do really well. And so I've really enjoyed seeing what he's done with the defense, even grabbing guys that you didn't think were going to be much. I mean, Cameron Curl's played super well. It does suck that we lost Collins. Who do we have? Bobby McCain that slides in behind him, I think, now that he's gone. But yeah, I'm really excited for what he's done for the defense. I haven't heard any whispers of anything in camp there, anything with Snyder being unhappy with him. I think we got to give him a little bit more chance on the offense. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question, but I don't think with the quarterback situation, I don't know if he could have done too much better. So I think he's got to put his money where his mouth is this year, and then again, if we have a nice season, can build up a little bit, I think next season is going to be the one where they're going to say, okay, we need to start seeing some success.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing because the NFL is so results oriented, right? Yeah. And I think a lot where a lot of teams really just dig themselves deeper into holes is that they don't have like a lot of stability in one way or another, usually at the head coach. So you look and you think like, well, is their head coach really worth keeping around? In this case, I would think Ron Rivera is worth keeping around just with his track record as a coordinator and then as a head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Had pretty good success there in a very competitive division back when it was like the Sean Payton Saints era, and everything else. 4 playoff appearances in his time in Carolina, led by Cam Newton, who just was a little erratic at times, but was he was an NFL MVP caliber player as well. Again, a lot of good defensive pieces there, and then Cam Newton basically. So I think if anyone can kind of keep the ship steady, it would be him, right? Like if you don't have him, like who else would you really want to bring in? It's just an question, because a lot of teams are at this point taking chances on like offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators, just trying to get like a new wave kind of see what sticks type of feel, like the Eagles hiring Sirianni, the Chargers hiring Brandon Staley, O'Connell going to the Vikings. So it's just interesting, Ron Rivera seems like one of the old timers that are still there, still solid, but it just, these teams that just have this like head coach carousel, they just seem to just always like not be able to bring themselves up from.
So many people look at, like obviously quarterback is important. Looking at us, but like, and pieces of your team, your players, of course, but like, that's so underlooked, I think, in so many teams is this head coach turnover, because even if you have these star players, they're getting thrown around in different formations every year and different playbooks and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure it's hard to settle into something. You're just kind of grasping at straws year after year when you have a new guy coming in.
Right. Now, it's one of these things where like if Rivera is successful in terms of wins and losses, that's what you want. That's what like the teams are basically looking for. Any chance to get a playoff appearance or like a home playoff game. I mean that's a lot of money. It's just unfortunate. So it drives everything. But then again, like if he is semi-successful but like doesn't have like the locker room, right? Like that still just might not be enough. But I still think he's still a stable of enough presence. Like you get these situations like Brian Flores where they technically on paper have like winning records, but maybe it's just like a culture thing that the organization doesn't want to have. They just want to kind of juice it up a little bit, bring in like a McDaniel. You know what I mean? Right. So it's just interesting to me. But I think I don't think he should be thought of on the hot seat. I don't think anyone's saying that. I'm not trying to make like a straw man or anything, but it is just one of these things where, consecutive losing seasons is not what teams usually want to put up with.
Yeah.
But either way, no, I think
side note, I think the one thing that we're going to struggle with, why is Dan Snyder still calling any shots ever? That is the one thing with our organization that I feel like either a miracle has to happen or that has to change before we're going to make a long push at having winning seasons regularly. Put all of his like drama and, extracurricular activities aside, I still think Snyder has his hand in way too much in our organization. He's an owner that doesn't know football. Isn't in the same way I know football. I mean, I can sit here and talk all I want, but I've never coached a team, and I'm definitely not at that level. And he keeps meddling. I think that's our issue.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting like dynamic in Dallas too. Like Jerry Jones wears all these hats, and maybe he shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like if he wants to be like instrumental in like the business side and just owning the team, but not be the GM, like whatever. But I mean, it's his deal. It's all on him. So I just think
I don't care about the Cowboys.
Oh, I don't either. I'm like, hey, whatever kind of chaos can in that organization, I'm great with. But to your point about Dan Snyder, you think he should sell the team then?
Yeah, there was like whispers for a while of like Jeff Bezos taking over buying the team, and I was like, bro, like I could like have, I don't know, he can ship me my games and my like fantasy gear and whatnot,
right?
Like.
Yeah, seriously, like that would be an interesting one. I would have like drones, like I don't know, for like referees. I don't know, like what do you do? But yeah, that would be an interesting one for sure.
But yeah, I do. I mean, like I think the majority of Commanders fans now are sitting at like, all right, Snyder needs to go. But
yeah,
he's got more money than me, so.
That's right. Yeah, I think probably a lot of the fan base has felt that way for quite a while. But yeah. But either way, he unfortunately is remaining. So we're going to be talking about the free agency moves now, see who has left the team, see who was brought on the team.
Yeah.
Some of the key losses, at least at this point, are looking like Brandon Scherf, offensive lineman, obviously, a safety, Landon Collins, who the team has not retained as of yet. I believe he is still a free agent, but it doesn't look good as far as his possibility of coming back.
Yeah.
Defensive end, Matthew Ioannidis, tight end Ricky Seals-Jones, who really just has kind of filled in for an injured Logan Thomas there. So it's not a devastating loss, but from like the fantasy perspective, he was like a tight end streamer, a couple weeks there. Then wide receiver Deandre Carter. I'm mainly bringing him up because I think he is pretty useful in like special teams and stuff. So he's like obviously like a second, third tier wide receiver option for the Commanders, but definitely had some like little flashes of big plays or on special teams.
I think he had like 20 PPR points one week. I think he won me a week. Like
perfect. There you go,
Carter.
There you go. Now the additions, obviously the really big one is bringing in quarterback Carson Wentz. We'll touch on him in a second. Plus offensive lineman Andrew Norwell and Try Turner. I guess trying to fill the void left by Brandon Scherf. And then J.D. McKissick was retained after all that debacle. Maybe he was going to Buffalo, and then he said nah, and he came back to Washington. So just another zero RB hero there. So thoughts on those free agency moves? Were there any other positions or specific players you were hoping the team would have signed? Or do you just kind of see the writing on the wall for where the team is at and think, probably not the best idea to make too much of a splash beyond upgrading once?
I was kind of glad we didn't go out and sign a big star for a whole ton of money for a window we're not going to make. So it sucks. I think a couple of the guys are big, like Landon Collins. Sucks losing him. Sheriff was probably one of my favorite players. Dude coming out of college, honestly, it was kind of funny. He looks exactly like my cousin. So my cousin gets stopped all the time because he lives in the Washington area, and people thought like literally he was Brandon Sheriff. But one of my favorite players, just an absolute mauler there in the trenches. Ioannidis, was with us for a while and definitely one of those super silent guys there on the end. But I wasn't. I mean, Ioannidis is awesome, but I'm not missing him much because I mean we've got like Payne, Jonathan Allen, Sweat, Chase Young, Federia Mathis. I mean like and Jamin Davis lines up in the edge sometimes too. So like we're full up there. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Colin sucked. Sheriff. I had a couple of other things written down here. Let me see what I put down. Oh, yeah, you mentioned McKissick. I'm really glad we got McKissick back. You know, like the tandem of watching him and Gibson this last year was actually a lot of fun. And I don't know where a lot of the there's been a lot of like weird Gibson hate recently coming out since Brian Robinson was drafted, and that was kind of out of left field for me too. And speaking of in the rookie draft, but McKissick is fun to watch. He's lightning quick, and him and Gibson out there on the field because Gibson can catch and run too. It was a lot of fun to kind of see them work together, and defenses not really know which way was going where. So I'm glad we got him back. Cam Sims, we did re-sign as well, and that was another one of those guys you mentioned, Deandre Carter. Cam Sims was one of those that kind of did some of that too. Gotcha. So I'm glad that we pulled him back. He's quite a bit younger. I don't remember. I think DeAndre Carter might be like 27, 28, and I know that's not, that's at my age. So I'm feeling pretty old, so I guess he's old. Right. Grabbing Cam Sims back, he does a lot of the same stuff. Is able to work on special teams. Made some really good plays for us, and then it like had some nice streaming weeks for fantasy as well as like our kind of wide receiver 3 thrown in there. So glad we got him. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Sweet. Yeah, so I'm very curious about your thoughts on the Carson Wentz trade and acquisition. What are your expectations from him, and do you think it'll be enough of a factor to elevate the team back to the playoffs? I know you're kind of thinking like a couple years from now, focusing on that defensive line, and again, we have Chase Young out probably most of the season. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah.
But as we touched on before, the quarterback position has been a bit of a mess since basically Kirk Cousins left for Minnesota. You had that Alex Smith like brutal injury, then just this carousel of quarterbacks that just has not been pretty, for lack of a better term. But basically, to acquire Carson Wentz, the Commanders. I'm about to say football team, then Commanders. The Commanders swapped seconds with the Colts, and they gave up a third, and then potentially a conditional third in 2023. So, do you think that is worth the like? Do you think that was worth it to bring in a guy like Wentz at this stage of his career?
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I think. Like kind of like what I've been saying before, I really am excited for being able to see what our offense actually can do. Some of our younger guys, and I mean Heineke's kind of could pull some crazy things out of a hat, but he's really not going to show what our rookies can do or what some of our younger guys can do or our whole offense as a whole. So I'm excited that we did that. I think it was a decent price for it. Wentz, actually, you mentioned Cousins. And I kind of wrote down here from the show sheet. I mean, Wentz to me actually kind of reminds me of Cousins in that way, and that he's like this. To me, he's still pretty underrated. No, he's not Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, but like he's not Andy Dalton either. I feel like Carson Wentz is a really solid quarterback. Cousins has choked sometimes towards the end, and Wentz has got some couple unfortunate games under his belt too, but. I mean, you guys got to a Super Bowl. You won a Super Bowl. Carson Wentz has played well. I'm excited to get him at that price, and I think he's a cool veteran presence that's going to come in there. And at least at the very worst, we don't have a crapshoot at quarterback anymore. We have a solid quarterback that knows how to play. Is going to take coaching well, and I believe we'll be able to just see what we can do here soon.
Definitely, no. My perspective on Carson Wentz as an Eagles fan is I just have always wished him well ever since leaving the team, because there have been these moments of greatness that like you really cannot deny. Just a lot of for every kind of bozo kind of a throw you see him do, there's 2 or 3 just fantastic plays where he's escaping the pocket on the run, throwing a dart. I mean, it's just incredible to see some of that. But I guess my perspective on him just kind of has been slowly chipping away a bit from his play on the field, because he has had these like kind of random injuries for his ACL in the season that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Then he comes back with like kind of a chip on his shoulder because he wasn't able to take the team where he wanted to take them. Then they go back to the playoffs. He gets
he put him there.
Oh, absolutely. And then the Eagles made the playoffs the following year. He was not healthy for that playoff run again. Then they had Nick Foles again, and then they got out in the second round. Then they made the playoffs again. They lost to the Seahawks because he got a concussion in the first half of the game. It was like one of these like late, dirty.
Maybe he's getting them all out of the way where he's good.
So it's just an unfortunate like series of events with him. But there are times where he has played good to solid, and then there are just these moments that aren't so hot, and maybe just me as a jaded sports fan, that's just what I focus on. Because like last year, for example, the Colts were in position to make the postseason, and they had the game against the Jaguars. It was in their hands, and they blew it. So is that completely on Carson Wentz? I don't know, but it just seems like in a must-win game, and you can't do it against the Jags, like the lowly Jags. It's like it just leaves a bad taste. But I think generally speaking, I think you should be very optimistic to have someone like Carson Wentz leading the way. Easily the best quarterback that has been on the team, since Kirk. Well, I mean, you can make an argument that like Alex Smith was like solid.
I like Alex Smith, but he's a game manager guy. He didn't make a lot of mistakes, but he's not going to win your games that your defense didn't. So
that's right. Yeah, and it is just such a fascinating thing about being back in the NFC East. We were talking pre-show about like the last time this happened. It was like Donovan McNabb. He left the Eagles and he went to Washington.
He was like 55 when he played for us, though.
That's right. Yeah, definitely in the twilight of his career, but still, I guess at that time they could have used him. I'm just drawing a blank. Like my sense of time is just like off ever since becoming a parent, but either way, that's not important. But what is important is that they actually have a very underrated starting caliber quarterback leading the way now. Yeah. So again, you have that with the good, solid head coach and Ron Rivera. I think it is a good recipe for success, especially with the ups and downs of like the NFC East. As it is, I don't know. I think again you're correct in having more of a grounded approach to it, but I think there's definitely reason to be optimistic there. And then speaking of optimistic, you were talking up some of the rookies that they brought in, so I'll just kind of review some of those. Like obviously free agency is one way to build a team, and the other way to build a team is obviously through the draft. So in the first round at pick 16, this was a trade back with the Saints. They selected Jahan Dotson, so that made me very happy as a Penn State fan and alumni. That to me was a pleasant surprise. I had him like figured to go like actually in the very first episode of this show, I did an NFL mock draft. I had him going to the Chiefs at pick 30, and even then I was thinking, I really like this guy, but like, does the NFL like this guy? Like, he was kind of like a borderline, to me at least, first round talent, easily round 2 type of a guy. And then, he goes at 16. I thought that was tremendous. I was really happy to see that the NFL liked him probably a little bit better than I was thinking they would. Right, so that was great. Then round 2, defensive tackle out of Alabama, Federian, that's an awesome name, Mathis. So just another.
We had to get our yearly Crimson Tide player, of course.
There you go. And then they doubled up in the 3rd round and took running back Brian Robinson, which was also, as you alluded to, kind of a surprise pick there, but I guess you'll take it. I guess we can touch on him in a second. Round 4, safety Percy Butler. Round 5 at pick 144, quarterback Sam Howell. I will definitely be touching on that in just a moment. I was Perplexed and amazed at that pick. Really, was very happy for Washington to be able to land him. But again, we'll touch on him in a bit. Then again, in round 5, 5 picks later, they take tight end Cole Turner out of Nevada. Round 7, they take a guard, Chris Paul, not that Chris Paul, the football Chris Paul now. Then pick 240, cornerback Christian Holmes. So I want to hear your thoughts on this draft class overall. Did you have a favorite or a least favorite pick? And were there any players you were sort of hoping that they would have gone with at the spots that they had, or are you happy with who they got?
Yeah, there were some ups and downs in the draft for me. I will say, so Dotson is like a weird. I love Dotson. Dotson was actually one of my favorite wide receivers in the draft. I was really high on him. I think he has the best hands in the whole class.
Absolutely.
One of my best friends, actually works for the Dynasty Rewind. If you follow some of their stuff there, he was huge on Dotson pre-draft, and so I had him in a whole bunch of rookie leagues or in Dynasty leagues already. So I was super excited to see him come to us. Really, really exciting. The problem with that, which I was a little. You guys got a freaking deal on AJ Brown, and it was almost the exact same trade. And while I love Dotson, I was sitting there thinking, how much value could we have gotten? Dotson's got to live up to a pretty high name in AJ Brown for that trade to actually have kept the value with the draft or the trade that you guys got. So that was an absolute steal of a trade, I thought, for you guys to get AJ Brown there, which is super exciting. But yeah, so it was like a flip side, like a double up thing. I was like, oh man, so I love Dotson, but I didn't think the value was super good for our trade back. But either way, Dotson's super exciting. I love that we actually were able to keep McLaurin. I did not expect him back at all. And so I was super, super high on Dotson. I figured he'd be our wide receiver one out there. And who knows, he could be an absolute beast and surpass McLaurin there. But either way, I think we've got a 1-2 punch at wide receiver that's awesome. So I'm super excited about that.
Yep.
Federia Mathis, he was one of the few. I don't go super deep myself on guards or defensive line guys generally in the draft. I kind of pick apart the wide receivers and running backs and quarterbacks and go from there. But so I didn't do a whole bunch of pre-draft stuff for him. So all I knew is he was solid second rounder at coming out of Alabama, and I'm like, all right, cool. Looked into him quite a bit. His name is amazing, and I'm happy with it because that's another hole we needed to fill there. Brian Robinson was probably my least favorite pick of our draft. I'd say he's a solid guy. I mean, I think he can be a solid second running back on the team. Definitely can come in and do, take some breather work. He's more of a plotter than he is, anything else. So I think he'll be a solid player for us, and that's cool. But it felt weird. It's third round. There wasn't a lot of value at running back there. There was quite a few guys that had bigger names than him coming off the board. I felt like we had a ton of holes at guard or cornerback or anything we could have filled there. So when I saw running back came up, I was like, okay, we can use it. I'm obviously not an analyst, so I guess we liked him. I don't know what this means for Gibson though. I think a lot of people are maybe a little too quick to say, oh, Gibson's done, or it's going to be a committee kind of thing. And I don't know what to think. It's not the 49ers who are just going to come out and pick some guy that they pull out of the stands to start running all over people. I love Gibson. I feel like every single time, you can look at stats and look at this and that, but as a Washington fan, I watch the games every week and I see Gibson get every first down we need him to get. If he's on the 3-yard line, he's gonna punch it in. I mean, he gets the work done. And so I've loved having him. Robinson to me maybe is a safety pick. Because we really don't have a lot behind him at all. McKissick obviously isn't going to fill that short yardage touchdown goal kind of deal. So yeah, we needed that spot, but I still feel like you can pull in an undrafted guy to punch something in at the end zone. So I felt like it was a little high there. Definitely my least favorite. Moving on, which I know is one of your favorites too, Sam Howell was probably my favorite pick of the whole draft, the entire draft. You mentioned that in your show sheet too. Like,
Yep.
I felt like that was a huge steal. Sam Howell was definitely in the mix for, it wasn't a crazy good QB class, but like definitely in the mix for one of the, top 5 guys. And I mean, like definitely solid at UNC. Was it UNC? Yeah. North Carolina.
Yep.
And he was at, he looks really good. I'm like, man, pulling him in the 5th, there was a lot of talk of him in the even late 2nd into the 3rd. And I know that might've been a little early too, but grabbing a quarterback that has a possibility to be, I mean, I guess everyone has a possibility to be good, but grabbing a quarterback that late that I thought was a top tier quarterback for the class, I was so excited about. That was definitely probably my favorite one.
Yeah, the big like storylines of the draft was like, where are these quarterbacks going to go? Because like the NFL draft hype machine is one of the more whimsical things you'll ever keep track of.
And I know you're an IDP guy, but I was gonna say most of the fantasy world is like, oh, it's only going to be wide receivers and quarterbacks for the entire first round, and you expect all these guys to go early, but.
It is funny, like this is on the IDP guys network, like from that, but like I cover offense for the site, so like it's just like it's one of those things that's like one of these like things I have to like speak on every time that gets brought up. So, like I actually don't know much about IDP. It's really funny actually, but a lot of great IDP minds over there, obviously. But getting back to Sam Howell and the quarterbacks, it really seemed like any one of Willis, Pickett, or I guess usually it was one of them to like almost like chalk in the first round. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't matter if they were going to go 6 to Carolina or 9 to
Malik
Seattle.
Willis was going like the 1 overall in every fantasy draft, super flex forever.
That's right.
I feel so bad for those guys now.
It's interesting. I did one of my rookie drafts before the NFL draft, and then a bunch were like 2 days after, 5 days after, because everyone was all like hyped up on like rookie fever and everything. Mm-hmm. We got to draft these we can't just enjoy the spring. We got to do it now, but back to Sam Howell, like after like the seemingly consensus Pickett, Willis, whichever order top 2, it could have been, I thought easily Howell going as the 3rd quarterback. Yeah. I thought he could have been the 2nd quarterback. I honestly did. Mm-hmm. So Pickett goes number 20 overall to Pittsburgh, obviously. Then Ritter goes in the 3rd round at 74th. Willis, 86th overall, also in the 3rd round. Then Corral in the 3rd round, 94. Then the next quarterback was Sam Howell at 144. To me, this was nuts, especially considering Corral, who I think is a pretty dynamic player, but ended he hurt his ankle in the bowl game. Like
wasn't that much to go on, and
right. So that seemed like a little rich to get him in the 3rd round, but that was before like the Panthers signed Baker and everything else. But Howell, his freshman and sophomore seasons from the 2019 and 2020 seasons, he had over 3,500 passing yards and 30 touchdown passes with 7 interceptions apiece. Then after that 2020 season, a very successful one, they lost a lot of talent to the NFL. Right, they lost Michael Carter. They lost Javonte Williams. They lost Diami Brown, who at one point seemed to be,
elite.
That's right. Yeah. He's got that dog in him. No. And then in 2021, so they obviously lost a lot of that talent, and there was a little bit of a drop-off in his production. Mm-hmm. Not like a horrendous amount, still 24 passing touchdowns, I think 9 interceptions. So it was less than, right. But I think you look at those first 2 seasons and have that kind of a drop off is just silly. Yeah. It's like the most like by the dip situation you've ever seen, at least as far as I'm concerned. And you look at what Carson Wentz is, solid starter, but has had some, instability in terms of his health and everything else. I think Howell is in a phenomenal setup behind Carson Wentz to learn from a great quarterback, but then also, like you said, have a really great young core of talent to support him, to lead the way for. So to me,
watch out for Diami Brown at our wide receiver 1 next year when Howell starts.
There you go. Yeah. I think they're like what is it, like breakfast buddies or whatever
Yeah,
from like the
yeah.
college days, right? But yeah, no. So I am so pumped for Howell and for the Commanders to be able to have that spot. But then you look, oh, but he's a fifth round. I don't think that matters right now because
No.
I do think he's a really solid player. Tremendous landing spot, really worked out beautifully. To touch on your point about Brian Robinson, that one did kind of make me like raise an eyebrow because, like you mentioned earlier, the combination of McKissick and Gibson was great. And
Yeah.
I was like kind of like a hipster, like Jarrett Patterson fan going into the season last year. And then when he
Yeah.
had time to have like significant touches, he did pretty well.
Oh,
All
speak
things
Jared
considered.
Patterson. So Josiah, who is the other side of the Gazette, was like a latched on to Patterson somehow. Like the dude had like 80% coverage across all dynasty and best ball
Oh,
leagues,
nice.
and I was all for it. But yeah, now recently it's not Jared Patterson's season.
That's
So
right. Yeah. Yeah. So I just was really excited for him going into the draft. And then, he lands in Washington, maybe undrafted, I think it was, but,
yep,
or the seventh. Yeah, something like that. And then he had a couple of those moments where, I mean, if you started him in the championship week, he got you a touchdown in the first
yeah, he
quarter.
did.
There's just gravy after that against the Eagles, of course, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but yeah, so that one was definitely a bit of a head scratcher to me, but that has brought on a very nice like buying opportunity on Antonio Gibson, and we can talk about that a little bit later too. But that one was definitely like I think they have other needs on the roster to
Yeah.
satisfy before that one. But
I do think, I mean, the upside is I do think, outside of maybe the quarterback position, they definitely, I believe, coaching staff put a lot more work into players that are drafted earlier. So I think that's part of the organization. And I mean, like, again, I didn't love that pick, but a third round running back is still, it's a pretty decent round to draft a running back in. I mean, you're going to put some work into that guy. And sure, if we lose McKissick next year, or even the year after, I mean, like, it's nice to be able to have someone that can punch in there. I mean, again, I would have preferred something like maybe in the New England situation where they grab Pierre Strong super late.
right.
But yeah, I mean, third round running back, they're gonna develop him, and who knows? I could be eating my words in a couple of years, and I would prefer that, but we'll see.
No, but because of the semi-surprising like draft capital he got, and again, he's an Alabama running back, right? I mean, you don't want to scout the helmet or
Yeah,
anything. I mean, he mainly played behind Najee Harris and stuff, who was a prolific running back, especially when you consider who Alabama's turned out. I actually ended up getting a lot of Brian Robinson in my rookie drafts. If I started like wide receiver, for example, he was absolutely a target of mine to get a running back in the third
coming
round.
back
So
around. Yeah,
so I have I think 35% rostership of Brian Robinson, but I'm at like 40 with Sam Howell. So I'm very
yeah, yeah,
into this offense in terms of like a taxi stash or like a deep bench situations, kind of hold him and just see what happens. So I'm really excited for that. Going back to Dotson, who I agree, you said he's got probably the best hands in the class. I think that is for sure, without a doubt. He just catches everything. Um, his player comp on Player Profiler was Tyler Lockett, so that gets me really excited. I mean,
yeah,
I loved what I saw out of Dotson at Penn State. This is pretty amazing, actually. He like doubled each season in college. He basically doubled his like every category for stats. So catches, yards, touchdowns, and the later he went on in his college career, he just was the obvious focal point of the
yeah, for
passing game.
sure. Yep.
And he still just dominated. Like it just, I mean, you knew where the ball was going. It didn't matter. Like he's that guy. In other words, just really hard hitting analysis there. But
Yeah.
no, I think he's tremendous. I'm all about Dotson. Very very excited for him. But like, would you have preferred someone like Treylon Burks there, for example, or was there like a different wide receiver you would have preferred with at that, I mean, obviously you're probably thinking, yeah, you might have not have wanted a wide receiver there, but you do like Dotson, so you're cool with it. Would you preferred like Treylon Burks there?
Um, Maybe I would have then.
Okay, sure.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, there was so much hype around Burks, and obviously we haven't seen any of these guys on the field yet. But and I'd done my research into all of them. But of course, once we did draft Dotson, I would go heavy into that, and I was like, man, this dude catches everything, and I love it. Not that. So you're saying the player profile was Lockett, and not that this is a good comparison, but for a while Washington had Pierre Garcon there. And Garcon was our guy that literally caught every freaking ball.
That's right. Yep.
And it was like, we had, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the other guys at the time. I can't remember I don't think Santonio Holmes was still there for a couple of years of Garcon. But we had a couple guys that were like these speedster guys that were going deep. Didn't always work out, but it's like you needed 6 yards. Garcon caught that freaking ball and could get lit up and he'd catch it. And that's what I'm loving about Dotson is I think he'll make it happen. He's going to be that guy that catches that ball, is able to get us some chunk yardage sometimes, but I think he'll be able to fall back more into that safety blanket second choice option. And when we throw it to him, he's going to catch it because McLaurin can do some crazy acrobatic stuff. He's fast. He pulls off some really crazy plays sometimes. And I think McLaurin is probably still going to be our big guy that pushes the ball downfield sometimes. But Dotson's going to catch that ball, and I love looking at that because I think that's like a really good 1-2 punch at wide receiver. Burks I love too. I mean, Burks is a big guy that's going to get things done. But I love that pick. I love Dotson. Back during the draft, I had a minute of okay, he better put his money where his mouth is when the season starts. But
yeah,
I like him. I'm excited for that pick for sure.
I love it. I do. So what we're going to do now is take a look ahead to the 2022 season. What do you think are realistic expectations in terms of a win-loss record for this season after reviewing the schedule? Where do you see them coming out at?
Man, the NFC East is wild. Like every year that I go and look at the schedule and try and kind of break down our wins and losses, I come pretty close on most of the outside division games. And then there's the inside division games where Washington will freaking lose to like a 0-10 Giants twice. Then we have some like Monday night miracle loss against the Cowboys. Like it's wild. So that's one thing I love about our division is it just like you can have one team that's 14-2 and 1-2 and 14, and the 2-14 will win because they freaking hate the other team. Like it just happens. So, but all of that said, I really am putting us at even. I mean, we're looking at 8-9, 9-8, which sounds weird to say now with that extra game, but
yep,
I'd say we're probably split down the center there, and a lot of those come down to the wire. There's some definite losses I see in our schedule for sure, but there's a few that'll go both ways. And what was it? I think it was 2 years ago. We were 7-10 or 7-9 because it was 2 years ago. And we had like 8 games that were decided by like 4 or 5 points. And
oh wow,
it was a really frustrating year because we had a lot of like either we were winning the whole game and then just completely lost it in the like last 5 minutes, or we had these giant comebacks and just couldn't close. And it was just a really frustrating year. It was a lot of like, I think there was like 6 games that year that were decided by field goals. So that was really, really frustrating in 2020, I think is what it was. But yeah, I mean, I'm still looking at I think we're a run-of-the-mill average team that are going to have to we're going to have to close to get those wins, or we're going to choke to get those losses. I don't see us decisively winning a lot of games, or getting killed because I love our defense is at. The problem, like I said, we had earlier last year was our offense just could not get it together, and they were actually sitting on the field for 38, 39, 40 minutes out of the game. And so, yeah, the other team's going to put up 30 points when that happens. But towards the end of the year, we started having more methodical, even drives, pulling it together a little bit more on offense, and our defense shot up to 4th or 5th place in yards and points allowed. So I'm excited for the start there, but I really do think that with Wentz, we're going to have to control that offensive game. We can't go down by 3 touchdowns. I mean, we've got to score points. So, yeah. But I'm thinking I'm going to say 9-8 because I'm slightly optimistic.
Perfect. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. The NFC East is such an odd division. No team has repeated as division champ since the Eagles did it between 2001 and 2004. So since 2004, there's not been a repeat division champ. So it's nuts. I do like a lot of the additions that the Eagles have brought in. I like their chances to be successful. But then again, I still do think like it is still Dallas's division at this point, even though they've had some pretty noticeable losses too.
I don't know, man. I tend to think you guys got it this year. I really do. I'm a huge, I guess you could say, Hurts truther.
Sure. I love that. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Hurts. I love the guys that'll kind of just like wow you, but then like absolutely do something incredibly stupid the next moment. But like I enjoy it. Like that makes fun games. So I'm excited to see Hurts out there with a veteran Devonta Smith. Like he's got a year under his belt. You pull in A.J. Brown. People I think are still going to way undershoot Miles Sanders. He's gets a lot of hate, but Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell back there, like if your defense can hold, I mean, like the problem with Dallas is right now they're having to put up 45 points a game, which they can do, but they lost Amari Cooper. Everyone's got huge expectations for Tolbert, but like I don't know.
And a couple linemen too. Like it's pretty significant. Like that really affects a lot of it. But no, yeah. So maybe I'm just like, I don't know. I just see that I see that Cowboys star, and I just like clench up. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I think the Eagles will be good.
I will never say that the Cowboys are going to be good ever.
Right. Yeah. It's like it leaves a bad taste in my mouth for sure. Just thinking it is awful. I need to like go to confession or something. But yeah. So no, I think 8-9, 9-8, I think is definitely reasonable. It's definitely an improvement over the last couple of years. And again, you just add the better quarterback to that. That makes a lot of. I mean, like you're talking about Kyle Allen or Dwayne Haskins, or whoever else was playing.
Gosh, Dwayne Haskins, I forgot about that era.
Well, it was the last couple games of the season. I think he was the starter for the last couple games of the season in 2020. Because I remember it was I think it was championship weekend. It was the football team against the Eagles. I just remember like that was one of these games where like Carson Wentz had one of these like impossible window throws, and like Miles Sanders caught it in like the corner. It was an insane Carson Wentz play. I recommend everyone look it up unless you're a Washington fan. It's going to bring up like bad stuff, for you. But either way,
I was watching that game in the car in like really spotty cell service, and it paused right before that happened, and then it came on, and I was like, "What just happened?"
Yeah. But no, I'm just saying like Kyle Allen and Haskins. Obviously Haskins has passed and everything else horrible, but. You put Carson Wentz in that situation, and I think a lot of those single score games go the other way. You know what I mean? So I think there's definitely a reason to be, optimistic, or at least on that side of it for sure.
Right.
So now we're going to flip everything onto the fantasy side of things. I do enjoy the typical football talk, but we do want this to be a fantasy football show at the end of the day. So what I want to hear from you, because I know you're a big Dynasty player, Dynasty redraft, you can go any angle you want, throw in both, looking for offensive players to target on the Commanders, to target at projected cost, and then players to fade at projected cost, if any.
Yeah. Well, I'll just break it down kind of by position a little bit, just so it makes sense in my head. Starting with Wentz, I think Wentz is a crazy value this year in most leagues. Obviously, in Dynasty, it's a little different to go out and get someone like that because we don't know what his longevity in Washington is going to look like. But in redraft leagues and best balls, that kind of thing, I am all over Wentz, especially because you can get him as your QB3. He's literally the only guys going behind Wentz are like Pickett and Mariota. Like literally every other starting quarterback except for the crapshoot in Seattle, is going before Carson Wentz. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Carson Wentz, I feel like, is going to score. I mean, even if he's between 15 and 20, that's a huge return. And I feel like that's really reasonable, especially because we're often playing from behind in our build right now. I'm all over Carson Wentz. I'm not taking him as my QB2 because I don't need to. So you can take him as your QB3 and get great value there. I'm all over Carson Wentz at his average draft projection right now. Running backs, I still am a Gibson fan. Like I mentioned before, Gibson's fallen so far. Now, for a while, I wasn't grabbing a lot of Gibson because the fantasy football community is so fickle. We are back and forth on people all over the place. For a while, Gibson was shot way up draft boards. He's sitting in the top 10, sometimes even top 8, especially in your dynasty drafts here. I'm all over Gibson still in dynasty. Redraft, I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like, but I feel like he's fallen far enough that I'm still comfortable where he's at. Most of the redrafts I've done in the best balls, he's going somewhere around Damian Harris. Who else we got? Even Tony Pollard. I've seen Tony Pollard go before Gibson. And I mean,
it's madness. It's absolute madness.
I guess there's a world where that happens, especially if Zeke gets hurt, but we're not drafting based off of what we're going to think is happening with injuries. So I'm still in on Gibson where he's at. McKissick is a great value because you can get McKissick way behind guys there's been hype for Nyheim Hines, of course. Miami is kind of a mess, but people are drafting Chase Edmonds pretty high, and I'm high on Edmonds too, but I feel like that could still be a mess there. McKissick is a guy that can blow up for a 21-point game, PPR anytime. And if you're grabbing him I'm literally getting him as a running back 5 on my team, and a guy that I can plug in and just hope for the best if I have a crappy week and he comes up with 20 points. That's wild. So I'm in on him. Wide receivers, I think they're kind of priced appropriately where we're sitting with McLaurin and Dotson. It's hard to kind of project those rookies there because Dotson could end up doing not a lot. There's always hype over wide receivers coming out. I mean, De'Ami Brown was a 3rd rounder for us last year and did absolutely nothing. Zilch. I mean, I think he had 6 catches on the whole year. So there's some times where you hype some guys up. Most of the guys around where McLaurin is going that I see in redraft is pretty good, I guess. I mean, I'll grab him there, but there's probably some other targets that I like more. Dynasty, now that McLaurin is signed there, I'm grabbing McLaurin. I'm grabbing him in Dynasty everywhere I can. I'm all over Dodson in Dynasty just simply because I think he's got a much better situation than even some of the guys that went before him or were projected in Dynasty leagues. Of course, Garrett Wilson, super high, went out to the Jets. Jets are a mess. Zach Wilson is not the answer, I don't think, but we'll see. But they've got a lot of talent out there now, which is kind of exciting for the Jets fans because New York hasn't had anything forever. So I'm still taking Dotson and Dynasty there. I kind of I'm pretty neutral and pretty unbiased when it comes to fantasy football and grabbing Washington players. I know a lot of guys like to go out and get their guys, especially if they're a Chiefs fan or a Bills fan, like to go out and get their guys early. I'm pretty good at kind of waiting on our guys, and I'm not going to grab a Washington player because he's a Washington player. But I am excited for him at ADP because they've dropped their offense way down, and I'm still a fan. I still think that we're playing from behind a lot, and we can put up some points. Gibson has been tremendously disrespected, but I still don't know what to think of that situation either. I know you put in the show sheet, you're a little bit iffy on him, and I get that with Robinson coming in. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the running backs there. But I'm generally still pretty high on where we are because most of the Washington players are where they're going in drafts is too low in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I am warming up each day to Gibson. And again, it's August 11th right now. A lot of drafts aren't even going to be happening for another 3 weeks.
But we're degenerates, so we do most of our stuff like all through the off season.
That's exactly right. I've already done. Like Scott Fishbowl, a couple other like charity drafts, and I wrapped up just my very first regular redraft league just last weekend. You know what I mean? So it's just it just never ends. But the Gibson value is just screaming right now. It's really hard to not buy in at that price because it was so like much higher last year.
Yeah, and then, I mean things change, but like these numbers may be way off, but I'm thinking he was close to 1,000 yards, if not over. Had 11 touchdowns. I know rushing touchdowns. And then he's dropping down to like the RB like 24, 25. Like, nah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, his numbers as a rookie were just astoundingly efficient. Like the amount of production he had per touch was like almost unheard of. It was unbelievable. So naturally that's going to bump him up. And then I was very in on him too last year. And then it just was a kind of a frustrating season when he was kind of like the lingering shin or whatever, So I think people are just kind of getting a little like shy about that. But I think part of it also is the Brian Robinson draft capital.
Yeah,
and
sure.
there was a very early
which is almost the exact draft capital that Gibson had. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So you think, well, that might not exactly bode well for him long term. Like maybe they just want like more of a traditional back because Gibson was like a wide receiver converted kind of a thing. Again, all to his credit for being as productive as he is. But there was also a blurb like very early into like rookie camp about Brian Robinson being this like smash mouth between the tackles, hammer. It's like all these like manly words, to like describe him in his play.
I'd love to see Robinson come out as like freaking LeGarrette Blount 2.0. Like
that's right. Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, the player profiler comp for him was Gus Edwards. Was Gus Edwards. So like you said earlier, it's kind of a plotter power, which there is absolutely room for. But I think he is still a rookie, so I still think like the Gibson value right now is tremendous. So I am warming up to him, but like generally in Dynasty, I'm a little worried about it. I guess I would say.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you.
For sure.
I'm not buying him in Dynasty, I don't think.
That's right. Yeah, so I'm not going out of my way to try to acquire him, but I'm sort of nervous, but just happy to kind of hold him and kind of.
There's like a weird thing, of course, with running backs or in Dynasty in general, where like there's a lot of guys where the owners won't sell them for less than they paid for them, which was two firsts a couple of years ago.
That's right.
I mean, even myself. I mean, if I paid a bunch for a guy, and I'm still in a position that I might be a contender, there's no way I'm selling Gibson for less than a good first and maybe a small other piece.
Right.
And no one's paying that. So if I have him, he's staying on my team. If he's not on my team, I'm not paying for him.
I've found I'm a very stubborn Dynasty player for sure. I'm like, I was so high on this guy. I'm like one that's like especially painful. Just real quick here is like Trey Sermon. I was like just as all in on a player as you could, and I was offered like 2/4 for him, and like I'm like, no, I'm going to see this through. I don't want your fourths, So it just was like one of these like stupid. Like I'm just so stubborn about it.
Hey,
like,
he's been getting some hype in camp.
Dude's
going to come out and lead the league in rushing attempts this year because Shanahan is insane.
He's going to finish as an RB1, and it's like, oh my god, No, but so it's just so that there's like a little bit of a stubbornness so that can come out there for sure. But targets for me in Dynasty: Dotson, Howell, Robinson. Gibson, I'm warming up to in redraft. Yeah. Obviously, Dotson, I still love as like an end of bench wide receiver.
Absolutely.
I'm all about that. Wentz, as you said,
he's actually one kind of a side note. I do a lot of best balls, and
perfect.
There's not a lot of guys that have that week 14 bye that are a really solid player.
Okay.
Right in that area, it's like I kind of break it down by like, certain parts of the draft, and right around that area, there's not a lot of other guys that are a week 14 bye. So he just kind of slips in nice. and you've got a player that, isn't going to be off the team when your stars are,
Oh yeah,
that's good.
definitely. Yeah, I like that. And then just to reiterate your point about Carson Wentz as a QB3, like stop the madness, everybody. Like it's insane. Like that's just a screaming value, and especially the point you made about them probably going to be playing from behind. I mean, that's only going to up his pass attempts and everything else. So again, another screaming value in McLaurin, McKissick, all these guys. I completely agree with that. Really smart breakdown. Players to fade. Gibson just kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies in Dynasty a little bit. Then redraft, I'm not fading any of them. I'm very in on all the players. They just have kind of a glaring hole right now at tight end. Like,
yes, that is true.
Because of the Logan Thomas injury. If he was healthy, I mean, he still would be like a tight end 12 or something.
I'm having a hard time figuring out what to do with Thomas. He's sitting there at the end of a lot of redrafts.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, there's some really big upside guys here that are kind of dart throws.
Yep.
And then I'm taking a huge risk with injuries there. But if you can get a tight end 10 to 12 that late in the draft, I mean, he's definitely a buy, but it really is. I don't see myself pulling the trigger that often simply because he is an older player and he does have injury history and he still has lingering injuries. So I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah, no, I think he's just a pure like watch list kind of a player for like waivers, like mid-season, right? In one of the charity leagues I did after the Scott Fish Bowl was called the Warrior Bowl. It's like a UK-based charity league, but it's tight end premium, like Scott Fish Bowl,
right?
Deep rosters and everything. I took Logan Thomas as my last pick as my tight end 3. And because he's already on the pup, just throw him on IR and I add someone else
out from the waiver. That's
now I just have a little lottery ticket just sitting there waiting for me. See what happens. If he just doesn't pan out, well, then he can just be cut or whatever.
You were able to grab someone else anyways. Yeah, that's a good move.
But when he's healthy or when he's viable, I mean, he's fantastic. I mean, I don't, anyone who's listening to this certainly knows what Logan Thomas did, especially 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But like right now, it's like John Bates, who's just a guy.
Yeah.
As far as concerned.
Like I might walk on and start playing tight end.
Right. It's like if you told me you were John Bates, I'd say, "Oh, it's great to meet you." I wouldn't know any different.
Maybe I could pull off the Logan Paulson look from a couple years ago.
There you go. But yeah, so that is kind of a glaring hole in the offense from the fantasy perspective, but should just bump up McLaurin, Dotson, all those, and or maybe even Diami Brown, of course. So, but yeah, is there anyone else you want to touch on, or do you feel pretty good about?
No, I think that's about it. I was gonna say the glaring hole at tight end really is. I mean, we're looking at John Bates and then I don't even know the guy's name, Cole Turner or something like that.
Cole Turner, right? Yeah,
I probably should know more about him, but I don't.
I mean, only in like the deepest dynasty leagues is he even being considered. Like
right.
He went in the 24th round of a startup I just finished up earlier today. So just kind of a lottery ticket for the taxi. It's just low risk, low reward, at least for year one. You know what I mean? So
right.
You see a gap in that position group, and you think, I
kind of a side note. I actually thought about that with we're not going to be lining up with a lot of Logan Thomas actually lined up at wide receiver quite a bit. We're lined out wide. We're not going to be doing that with John Bates. He's definitely a blocking tight end more so, and he can catch, but he's a bigger guy that might be a red zone target, but isn't going to do much, of course. And we're not going to like run plays for John Bates. But I could foresee us actually running some really interesting formations, throwing Gibson out wide again.
Okay.
And if Gibson starts getting some wide out work, because they pulled in Brian Robinson, I thought that a couple times. I'm like, man, if they pulled in a third rounder that's going to be a little stronger, a little bigger, I could and not running a lot of 2 tight end sets, which we did pretty regularly last year. It could be interesting to see Gibson run out wide with McLaurin and Dotson there, and then you've got McKissick and Robinson in the backfield. I mean, like, you could do a lot with that. So I'm kind of excited for that too.
It is interesting because where Carson Wentz really did succeed extremely well in Philadelphia was peppering Zach Ertz and then
Dallas Goedert.
And Dallas Goedert, so he can definitely play like the middle of the field extremely well. So if there is a body at tight end on the Commanders, I think that they're at least worth a look in like the deepest of dynasty leagues, especially tight end premium. But I think for all intents and purposes, Bates is probably just another guy. But definitely, like, hey, just well, why not if you need a spot that
he's
if
a
you're
starting tight end, grab him before
right.
Someone else.
Right. Yeah. So I love it. I think this was a really great chat. I think we have really good expectations. I think I've gotten a better appreciation for these offensive skill positions. So now I have a lot more to consider with my upcoming drafts here. But Kieran, I appreciate you coming on. Well, one last time, can you please tell everyone about where they can find your work? On the internet or on Twitter, wherever.
Yeah. So I'm with the Fantasy Gazette, and that is on Twitter at Fantasy Gazette _, I believe, because some idiot stole our name 5 years ago, so before we thought of it. So, but Fantasy Gazette _ we are on Twitter. We do have a TikTok as well that Josiah actually does most of our work on. We put stuff out on Instagram, on our website at fantasygazette.com. If you are a boomer, we might make a Facebook soon. So you can hop on that. But yeah, that's where you can find us. We're putting out content all the time. Most of the time, we're just throwing out some tweets making fun of the fact that we take fantasy football way too seriously. A lot of times we'll throw in some articles. That's where I have the most fun, is the articles. You can kind of be a little bit clever with it. But those memes, of course, get the retweets going. So that's where you can find us.
Yeah. And again, I just wanted to reiterate how great that is to come up on the timeline, because we do take it so seriously and we are such nerds about it. And there is just a lot of toxicity out there as well. Then you pop up and you just see something so ridiculous and funny. It's like, oh, I feel so much better now. But it is really smart humor. It's really cleverly done. So I really, again, just am just such a fan. So I
love that. Yeah, you interact with us a good bit. It's a lot of fun. I love the fact that we're blocked by so many people on Twitter, because they've come at us and we say something like fantasy football and they get mad.
But so many of just like the little like comments back to accounts that are like source, and you'll just be like something like just a snippy. That is almost funnier than like the quote. But I'll just laugh out loud all the time. I
love what we enjoy the most ourselves, because it's like there's something about being anonymous on the internet and being able to like yell at strangers without them knowing who you are. That is wonderful.
Like, you just lean into it just so well and just so perfectly. I just wanted someone to tell you that in case, you thought it or you weren't sure if like other people were catching what you're throwing down. Don't ever change. I love it. But yeah, so I appreciate you coming on. And again, best of luck to you with your fantasy leagues. And of course, best of luck to the Commanders. And again, everyone check out the great content at Fantasy Gazette. That's going to do it for today. Good luck. So much, and you got it. And keep climbing, everybody.